My son, Ethan, stood trembling outside our front door, tears streaking his cheeks, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He was only 12, just trying to get home after school, but a burly HOA security guard in a cheap uniform loomed over him, barking into a walkie-talkie with the smugness of a man who thought he owned the world. I just pulled into the driveway in my unmarked black SUV, fresh off a classified counterterrorism mission abroad, when I saw it all unfold. The guard, chest puffed out, pointed to the sidewalk like he was shooing a stray dog, claiming Ethan was unauthorized to enter his own home. My blood simmered, but I stayed calm. This guy had no idea I was a Homeland security commander, and he'd just stepped into a firestorm he couldn't imagine. I stepped out of the vehicle, locking eyes with the guard, my boots crunching on the gravel. Ethan spotted me and choked out a sob, pointing at the man who'd made him feel like a criminal. The guard raised a palm at me, as if I were some suburban dad he could bully. I asked, voice steady but laced with steel, what the problem was. He didn't even glance at the government ID badge clipped to my belt, just spouted some nonsense about a new HOA rule. Minors couldn't enter without a registered residence supervision. Ethan had a key. He lived here. The guard waved it off, saying he'd never seen Ethan before and I'd need to file a formal request for my own son to access our house. The absurdity would have been laughable if it hadn't left Ethan shaking. I told the guard he was making a mistake. He smirked, told me to take it up with the HOA president, and warned that interference would earn me a citation. I could have flashed my badge, dropped a single sentence to make his world collapse, but I didn't. I wanted to see how deep this arrogance ran. After getting Ethan inside and calming him down, I dug into the HOA's latest newsletter. Buried on page 4 was a clause about minor escort requirements, slipped in without a vote or community approval. It was the brainchild of Pamela Reed, the HOA's self-styled queen, who neighbors whispered had grown unhinged, ruling with an iron grip. She'd hired a private security outfit, Falcon Watch, a ragtag crew of ex-mall cops and bar bouncers with no training or state license. I made quiet calls to my DHS contacts, asking for a rundown on Falcon Watch. The results were damning. A shell company with fake addresses, led by Pamela's brother-in-law, funded by mysteriously spiked HOA fees. This wasn't just petty overreach, it smelled like a scam, maybe even criminal. I walked the neighborhood that evening, blending in as just another dad. Residents approached, some whispering, others fuming. An elderly woman, Mrs. Carter, said the same guard had fined her for her grandson's car parking too long. A young dad shared how his daughter was stopped and searched for skateboarding near the clubhouse. Everyone was angry, but fear of Pamela's fines and Falcon Watch's intimidation kept them silent. Back home, I installed 2 micro cameras sewn aimed at the HOA gate, another at the clubhouse. I needed hard proof, not just stories. Ethan watched, still shaken, asking why I hadn't crushed the guard on the spot. I knelt beside him, showing him a photo from a hostage rescue mission in Kabul, agents behind me in formation. I didn't yell then either, I said. Justice needs patience and proof. That night, my cameras caught the guard, now clearly a petty tyrant, shining his flashlight into parked cars and banging on doors over minor infractions like a trash can 6 inches out of place. At 9:17 p.m., another guard frisked a teen walking home, claiming he matched a loitering suspect. I hit record. By morning, I'd uploaded the clips to a secure drive labeled HOA violations and emailed them to an old friend, Special Agent Daniel Holt at the DOJ, with a subject line, potential abuse of private security powers. I didn't use my title. Holt knew who I was. The facts would scream for themselves. The next day, I kept listening, walking the neighborhood as an investigator in plain clothes. A retired cop, Miguel, said he'd been threatened with a fine for flying a Marine Corps flag on an unapproved pole. A single mom, Lena, told me her son was tailed by guards for biking, accused of disturbing the peace despite wearing headphones. An elderly couple admitted they'd stopped inviting their grandkids over because guards interrogated them about their parents' marital status. This wasn't security, it was harassment, sanctioned by Pamela's delusional regime. I dug into HOA meeting minutes, buried in a clunky online portal, and found blood-boiling details. Unapproved dues hikes funneled to Falcon Watch, vague invoices signed by Pamela's brother-in-law, and surveillance cameras installed without notice. I printed everything. That evening, a sharp-eyed man in plain clothes knocked on my door. He introduced himself as Vance, Holt's field contact, and dropped a DHS-marked file on my table, complaints, affidavits, and unlicensed activity reports on Falcon Watch. Your footage seals it, Vance said. They're operating illegally in areas we've flagged. We need a civilian case. You're the anchor. I nodded. I'd spent years tracking terrorists and cartels. This HOA was just a smaller, uglier version of unchecked power. Vance handed me a burner phone, saying, "Call Hawk when it's time." I pocketed it and sat with Ethan, promising ice cream tomorrow. He deserved to feel like a kid, not a prisoner. The next day, my cameras caught a guard tipping a kid's bike, standing over him like a bully while the boy scrambled up. I uploaded the clip to Vance. No reply, was already moving. That afternoon, the burner phone buzzed. HOA meeting tonight. Be there. Smile. I slipped on a polo and jeans, looking like any other dad, and walked into the clubhouse. Pamela, in a garish blazer, ranted about juvenile crime and ID scans for kids. I stood at the back, arms crossed, letting her bury herself. After 10 minutes, I raised my hand. She faltered, but let me speak. I asked, calmly, what authority she had to enforce federal-style entry rules in a private neighborhood. She sputtered about bylaws. I cut in, asking where the charter allowed pat-downs or resident bans. She deflected. I slid a printed invoice onto her podium, voice loud. Recognize this signature? Her face twitched. Board members leaned in, murmuring. The DOJ does, I added. Gasps rippled. Pamela called it slander, threatening to call the police. I leaned close, smiled, and whispered, I am the police. Then I walked out. By morning, the neighborhood buzzed like a storm was coming. Group chats exploded with questions. Who's the guy who torched Pamela? CIA. Ethan walked to school with a spring in his step, saying the guards avoided him. They were rattled, and rattled men are dangerous. I kept the cameras rolling. The burner phone buzzed again. Prepare. Sweep. I knew what was coming. DHS didn't negotiate. I slipped a note into the HOA newsletter's draft, courtesy of a fed-up board member. Expect government audits of security contractors. Cooperate. It was vague but sharp, designed to spark panic. That night, guards huddled nervously at the clubhouse, pointing at the newsletter pinned to the window. Pamela was nowhere in sight, likely scrambling to save her empire. At 6 a.m., unmarked SUVs rolled in, followed by a dark van. I texted Hawk, one word, confirmed. By 7:04, the sweep hit. Agents flashed badges, ordering guards out of the shack. The one who'd blocked Ethan hesitated, reaching for his phone confiscated instantly. Another team stormed the HOA office with subpoenas and warrants. Pamela burst out in a bathrobe, shrieking about property rights, demanding they leave. An agent handed her a DOJ folder with her name. She screamed about HOA sovereignty, and the agent deadpanned, "Ma'am, we are the government." That line went viral hours later. Residents spilled onto lawns, filming, whispering, some cheering. One guard was cuffed for carrying an unlicensed weapon. Another was escorted into a van. I stood across the street, coffee in hand, watching the chaos unfold. By noon, the HOA office was files bagged, computers seized. I handed over my footage, invoices, and testimony as the reporting party. Vance nodded, saying, "You built the case before we arrived." Pamela faced charges: fraud, illegal surveillance, obstruction. The guard who'd humiliated Ethan was held for unlawful detainment and impersonation. Falcon Watch was exposed as a front, its guards banned, some with prior convictions. Ethan watched from the porch, holding a small flag, smiling. "They're gone, right?" he asked. I nodded. "You can go to the park again, buddy." That night, neighbors gathered unprompted, lawn chairs and music filling the clubhouse lawn. Kids ran free, parents laughed, and the air felt alive. Mrs. Carter took my hand, saying my work reminded her authority could protect, not just punish. The news exploded, Pamela's sovereignty rant looping on TV, our neighborhood a symbol of HOA overreach. Charges piled up. Pamela's due scams ran back 2 years, funneling cash to shell companies. But victory wasn't enough. I wanted safeguards. I hosted a community meeting on the green. A lawyer offered to draft a new charter. A teacher suggested a resident-led watch. A mom cried, saying her son feared biking. I shared Ethan's story, not my rank, urging trust over control. The crowd voted to oust Pamela and rewrite bylaws. No more hired goons. Weeks later, the HOA became the residents' council, transparent and open. Volunteers replaced guards. Ethan rode his bike freely, set up a lemonade stand, and stopped asking permission to play outside. I walked the neighborhood nightly, not out of duty but choice. A handmade, "Welcome Home" banner hung where the guard shack once stood, kids' drawings scrawled across it. My wife handed me coffee one morning, asking if I'd rest. I said I'd never fully stop watching. Once you see corruption, you scan for it. But for now, I could breathe. This wasn't just a place to live anymore. It was a home, built on courage, where power belonged to the people who cared.